In this video, we will talk about forensic anthropology, or in other words, bones. So what can bones tell us? Well, first of all, the name of the study of bones is osteology. That will sound a little familiar to you from the osteoporosis commercials on TV. Here's a little factoid that you do need to know. An adult has 206 bones if they have all the bones they are supposed to have and no extras. Babies, however, are different. They have over 300. That is because later on in life, they fuse together to make one bone. Your bones contain a record of your physical life. It can show things about your health, about any injuries you've had in the past, how much you work out. There's a lot bones can tell us. And other things they can tell us is the gender of the person, the age, the height, and they can also tell race, although race is a little difficult to do nowadays. So how are bones connected? They're connected with three main things. The first thing is cartilage. That is the protection that wraps around the ends of bones. It would be very painful not to have cartilage, and some people have to have surgery to replace cartilage that has been worn away. Ligaments are the bands that connect bones together. Some of you may have torn ligaments before. Your tendons connect your muscle to your bone. Until you are about 30 years old, your bones are going to continue to increase in size. That doesn't mean length. It might mean width or just bulk up a little bit. After 30, they can start breaking down, and so you are encouraged to exercise and eat right. Estimating height. We will do an activity with this on Monday. You can look at any of the long bones in the body. Those are your leg bones and your arm bones. And you can actually figure out how tall somebody was. You get a range of heights, but it's pretty accurate. You will be given formulas during lab and on any test or quiz, so you do not have to memorize the formulas. So how do we distinguish what gender a skeleton is? Well, there are several different bones that can be looked at, but the best one to look at is the pelvis. For females, their subpubic angle, that's the one that's marked in red, that is going to be at least 90 degrees, if not more, for the average female. It might be a little less for some. And males, it's usually significantly less. Also, if you look at a pelvis, and we will look at some of these in class, the female's whole pelvis is spread wider than males. And you can see that just when you look at a person. Girls have wider hips than boys do. Here's another thing with the pelvis. If you look down into the pelvis, you will see the opening. And for girls, your tailbone, its proper word is the sacrum, it is not curved as much as the boys are. It's curved a little bit, or also it'd be very painful to sit down. Another thing that females might have is if they have given birth before, they may have scarring on their pelvis. We will look at these so it will make a little bit more sense, the oval versus heart-shaped. Here's another picture that kind of shows that oval versus heart shape. Skulls can be used to help determine gender. There are several things we can look at. Boys tend to have squared off eyes. Girls have more rounded eyes. Jaws. Guys tend to have more of a square jaw versus a more V shape for girls. The brows of a guy are going to be much thicker. Imagine where the eyebrows are and where the forehead is. In there, it's much thicker for guys. Guys also have another thing. You have something called an occipital protuberance. It is present in guys. Occasionally, girls might have a small little bump there, but for the most part, it is guys. And sorry, boys, but you will probably have some girls feeling the back of your head to feel that bump, because we don't know what that feels like. Looking sideways at the skulls, if you look at how much the forehead going up to the top of the head slopes, boys slopes way more than girls do. Girls is more of a high rounded. This is a generalization. All of these are that I'm about to go through. There are girls that will have sloping foreheads and boys that will have rounded foreheads. What we will do is we will get an average. We'll look at everything and the majority rules. So the majority of the points match male, then we will say that is a male. Another thing is surface of the bone. Guys, you have very bumpy bones. Your skull, your arm bones, everything, the surface of it is bumpier than girls are. Ours tend to be more smooth. The jaw angle, we talked about looking from the front, now from the side. Guys have roughly around 90 degrees. It's a little bit more than that, but somewhere around 90. Girls, ours tends to be much wider than 90. Another thing we can look at, it's not as helpful, but you can look at the femur. That's your thigh bone. If it goes straight up and down when it attaches to the pelvis, that tends to be males because they're more straight up and down. And then girls tend to be at an angle, which gives you your hips. Rib cages and shoulders can be looked at, but it's not 100% reliable. But if all you had was a rib cage, you can look at the general size. Guys tend to be larger and wider than females. Race. Race is really difficult due to mixed heritage. It's not a perfect science, but there are some things we can look at, and all of this will be looked at in lab. We can look at the eyes, the shape of the eyes, shape of the nose, and we can look at the jaw. When you look at people of various races, we can distinguish a lot of the different features that match a specific race, and that can be seen on the skull. According to forensic anthropologists, there are 3 categories of people, 3 groups: Caucasoid, Negroid, Mongoloid. Here's an example from each of them. There are more peoples that fall into each category. In society, we will break them down even more, but according to bone structure, there are just the 3, and you do need to know them. So how do we estimate age? We're going to look at the skull. Babies are born with soft spots. The soft spots are actually where the different plates on the skull are merging together, and they haven't merged to that central point. So you can see the soft spot on this baby skull, and then here we'll progress through time, and you'll see the skull, it changes shape a little bit as people get older. One of the things we can look at to determine age is we can look at the suture lines. So if you look at the picture up there, that's actually a baby. You can see the soft spot on there. But there are 3 main suture lines on your skull. By about age 30, the one going across the back of your skull is going to close. Then around age 32, the one running across the top of your skull going from back to front is going to close up. And then the last one doesn't close up until around age 50. And that's the one that goes around the front. Another thing we can look at are these lines where as bone is growing, it replaces cartilage and little lines form. Here's a picture of a boy at 6 months, then 6 years and 8 years. You can see him getting more and more bones, more and more definition in his hands. You know, babies can't really grip things really well. They don't have all the bones there to help support and grip. 6 years old, they're getting some wrist bones, so they're able to start writing and controlling their hand. By 8 years old, they've got their wrist bones and they're able to really control something. So babies, they just don't have the structure to be able to manipulate things as well as somebody that is older. And all of this happens at different ages. So with the long bones, you can also see these lines. It happens at different ages on different bones as to when these lines form. But this all has to do with you growing. In the middle, you'll see a picture of a bone with the growth plate. You may have heard how you have growth plates. They can be very painful to break if you are in the process of growing and it started to fuse together and you break it off. It is a very painful thing. All right, so when a forensic anthropologist gets a skeleton, after they determine who the skeleton might be, or race, age, and all that, they're also going to look at any damage on the bones, and they're going to determine whether that damage occurred before or after death. They're also going to try and determine, was it because of a weapon or because some other kind of injury. If the damage happened after death, then they may look to see, was it because animals got to the body or something else happened. And they're going to look at any wounds, and they're going to try and determine, did it happen from sharp force trauma? That means like a stabbing of some kind. Blunt force trauma, being hit really hard with something. Gunshot wounds. And knife wounds. Knife wounds are a little different. They can be serrated or just smooth in, and so they have distinct marks that they will look at. Facial reconstruction can be done to help us identify who the skeleton is. If only a skull is found, we don't know who it is. So there are artists out there that can put together, just from the skull, put together a face. We'll talk a little bit more about this in class, and I'll show you some video clips so that will make a little bit more sense. But they have 2 ways of doing it. They can do it with a computer program, but a lot of artists are purists and they will use clay. What's kind of neat is they take what's essentially an eraser from a pencil and they cut it to the length that is necessary to match the depth of tissue on the skin. If you feel right now on your cheekbones, you don't have a whole lot of muscle or tissues right underneath your eyes on your cheekbones. But if you go down lower along your chin to your jawline, you have more tissue there. They would need to put erasers on that are a little bit longer on that jawline so that they could match a person's tissue depth. Here's another picture. There are all kinds of kits they can use. Some like to add in muscles and fatty deposits. They'll add in eyes. They'll add hair. They'll add wrinkles if the person is older. They'll try and match the hair and clothing to the time period. So this lady was from a while back. Here's a picture of, you've got the skull, the reconstruction, and a picture of the real lady. Now it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. That just came from an artist with clay and the skull. This is an example of real life where it's worked. John List killed his whole family and moved away. And then America's Most Wanted wanted to use his story. So they had this artist recreate him and age him. Now, they didn't have a skull, they just had old pictures. And so they took the old pictures and he reconstructed it, and all kinds of people called in right away while the program was going, and they ended up catching him. And it was pretty accurate. You can see the picture, his mugshot, and the picture of the reconstruction over there. And last thing, forensic experts will do other things besides just deal with a specific skeleton that comes to their office. They may go and help out with mass murders such as 9/11. They may help discover things about mummies. They may look at historical figures that somebody wants to look at something about, did they really die this way? And occasionally they will work with dinosaurs. So that's the end of bones, and we will do a lot of this with lab.